Welcome back to Tuesday Talks. We're super excited that you're here. I'm going to make sure that we are live streaming everywhere we need to be. And you all can get situated by making sure that your chat box is open and your Q&A box is open. And we're going to be doing a couple of polls today as well. So make sure those, you know where everything comes up on your screen. And if I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that if you need any Chinese support today, like 如果需要中文服务的话，可以扫这个二维码. You can go ahead and I always put the YouTube link here as well, because I know sometimes Zoom is not cooperative worldwide at all times. So we'll go ahead and put that up in case you want to keep listening and you can't. There is a chat in YouTube as well, so you can ask questions there. If for some reason Zoom's not working for you, don't worry about it. I will be checking that as well. Just want to say a special thank you once more to all of our partner schools, our Tuesday Talk partner sponsor schools. Thank you so much for continuing to log in every Tuesday and also tell all your friends and your family members about this opportunity. And if you do not see the name of your school on this list, we're happy to have you be a sponsor as well. So go ahead and send us an email if that's something that you'd like to do. But by all means, invite everybody. This is free for everyone and a great resource. And I'm super, super honored that we often have admissions officers who are willing to come on and just have a great conversation with us. And today we're talking about essays, which is a topic that a lot of people have asked for, have always wanted to ask for, and we're just going to have a conversation about it. And I know a lot of you came on this call because you saw ChatGPT in the title. We will touch on that as well, and there's lots to talk about with that. And I'm excited to have this conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my guests. They're going to each introduce themselves real quickly and the institutions they're from, and then we will dive in. Brendan, you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting myself and the University of Rochester here today. My name is Brendan Bond. I'm one of the associate directors here in the Office of Admissions at the University of Rochester. I work specifically with international students and primarily students from South Asia and India. Should we do our university introductions as well?
Sure.
Perfect. So I work obviously at the University of Rochester. We are a comprehensive research one, top 35 nationally ranked university in the upstate city of Rochester, New York. We are not New York City. We are Rochester, New York. We're about 5.5 hours northwest of New York City. There are other cities in this beautiful state outside of New York City. We are incredibly diverse here at the University of Rochester. We have students from all 50 states. We have students that represent 70 plus different nationalities and territories at the undergraduate level, 5,500 undergraduate students, about 5,500 graduate students. So one of the smallest, most collegiate of the United States top research institutions. We are supported between 4 different campuses here at the University of Rochester, our main River campus, as well as the Eastman School of Music, of course, our School of Medicine, and the associated research institutions with our School of Medicine, and of course, our Memorial Art Gallery in downtown Rochester. So that's a little bit about the University of Rochester, and looking forward to chatting more about essays. Thank you.
All right, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, morning, afternoon. Great to see you all. My name is Michelle Trimpe. I work as the Director of International Admissions at the University of Chicago, and I'm also the admissions officer for all students who are applying from China and East Asia. A little bit about U Chicago. So we are a private institution in Chicago, and all of our students are studying the liberal arts within a liberal arts college, but they're situated within a large research institution with about $500 million of research funding each year, over 95 Nobel Prize winners affiliated with the institution. We're known for being the first to split the atom, discover carbon-14 dating, and also create the disciplines of sociology, ecology, and behavioral economics. That's a little bit about U Chicago. I think I was also supposed to share a fun fact about myself. So a fun fact about myself. So if you've seen Hamilton the musical, I know every word to every song of the musical.
Very impressive. I don't think I can offer anything more fun than that. But hello, everyone. My name is Pan Luo. I am the Associate Director of International Admissions at Brandeis University. A little bit about the university. We are a mid-sized world-class research university located just right outside of Boston in a town called Waltham, sort of like 14 kilometers away. In my opinion, this area is one of the most vibrant neighborhoods in the United States. We offer 44 majors, 51 minors, a lot of different options for students to choose from. For example, business and econ, computer science, neuroscience, environmental studies, you name it. So as a tier 1 research university, our students really have the opportunity to interact with, world-class faculty and engage in cutting-edge research as early as their first year. We also have a strong commitment to liberal arts education. So our students, they definitely have the academic flexibility to mix and match your academic interests. One fun fact about Brandeis, ultimately, we were founded in 1948. We're just 1 year older than the People's Republic of China. And then one piece of fun fact about myself, I would just say I have two absolute passions. One, I'm a foodie. I love sampling food from around the world. And the second, I'm a strong proponent of education, and I have a degree in international education. That's why I created an Instagram account called the International Higher Education, with the goal of featuring delicious, cuisines from around the world, but also utilizing it as a space to really promote cross-culture understanding. So that's a little bit about Brandeis and myself, and look forward to chatting with everyone a little bit more about essays.
All right, Brendan, did you want to give us the fun fact?
Okay, sure. And this is a little bit in line in terms of working with international students. I actually never attended university in the United States. Both of my degrees I pursued outside of the US. So like many of the students here, we're all very invested in the international education experience.
Wonderful. And I always forget to introduce myself, but my name is Gloria. I'm one of the co-founders of Initial View, also host of Tuesday Talks. My fun fact today, I have to give a fun fact every Tuesday. That's a little crazy. You're going to get to know me a lot. My fun fact, I might not have mentioned this on a Tuesday Talk. I have 3 children, and my oldest is a junior, and he is about to get his license, and that is kind of freaking me out. So that's my fun fact of the day. And I want to know who you all are. So I'm going to go ahead and put up my Who Are You poll, and you guys can tell us who you are if you're applying to college this coming cycle or the next cycle, if you're a parent, if you're a counselor, educator. And so right now it looks like people are still participating, but we've got maybe 50% of you are actually educators, counselors, or teachers. And so that's really exciting. And in terms of students, we've got most of you who are here as a student are looking to apply this fall, which is great. This is a timely topic for you as you're thinking about what you want to write about. And I'm just going to give it like 30 more seconds. So if you don't see the poll, look for it on your screen. I'm going to see, we've got 75% participation, which is pretty good for a Tuesday talk. Let's see, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We got it to 77% today. And yes, almost half of you are counselors and educators. So I think the the word ChatGPT probably got you in here to really want to talk about like, how do I help my students with navigating the essay now that there is this new tool. So, okay, so we're going to start with a few chat questions. Let's see. And what does authenticity mean to you? Because we always start off our conversations about essays and really all of holistic review. If you've been to any of our Tuesday talks, you have heard the term holistic review, and you know that especially in the US, when we're looking at admissions, we're not looking at just a grade or a test score. We're looking at many things, but it's easy to kind of try to want to package yourself. So what does authenticity mean to you? And this is what I was saying about every Tuesday talk. This is why I open up your chat box, because I want you to start chatting. Okay. So if you can type in anything that comes to mind immediately when you hear the word authenticity. And while people are warming up, it's always a little hard on that first question for people to type. While people are warming up, what does authenticity mean to you, admissions officer? We have some people typing in true and reliable, real and sincere experience. When you all say, we want you to be authentic, what do you mean by that? Okay, now people are chatting. A voice that sounds like no other, of your own, personal, staying true to yourself, not telling lies, true. These are great. Brandon, Pan, and Michelle, what are some things that come to mind when you say the word authentic? Be authentic. Show authenticity.
I can hop in there. I think the quote about staying true to yourself is something that I think about when thinking about authenticity. I think being authentic in the application process is starting long before you even start applying. It's really about doing the things that are interesting to you throughout every step of the process. Are you involved in sports or Olympiad or volunteer work because you genuinely like those things, or because you think it will be helpful to your college application? So every choice you are making in high school and beyond is going to really reflect what you're interested in. And so we want to see that you're doing things that you like to do. And when you're doing things you like to do, the way that you talk about them in the application process is going to be more authentic because it's more sincere, it's more true to yourself.
Yeah, I would just add one more thing there. I was an international student myself, so I went through the entire process. I think sometimes when we are thinking about, being authentic, we think it's sort of static, fixed concept, but actually being authenticity can manifest in different ways, right? Different directions. And then you can really, it allows you to embrace different aspects of who you are as a person. There's so many different ways for you to narrate your stories. There's so many stories of you that you get to tell. So I think to just break sort of the stereotype of being authentic, there's only one way of being authentic. So that's my main thing. And I would say another thing is about being authentic means that you're going to put your best foot forward. You don't want to write something, even though you're staying true to yourself, but you don't want to write something that you don't want your headmaster to see in a college application. So that's just my 2 cents when it comes to being authentic.
And the only thing I might say relative to authenticity is, in terms of the essay and how are you capturing authenticity, one way to think about how to structure your essay or to best demonstrate authenticity is to think about what you're doing when no one is watching. How do you express yourself? How do you play? How do you, when self-consciousness is not present in kind of guiding your actions? And the essay is really looking to best capture that. And if you think about that, what do you do when you get home from school and you're in your room and you're thinking about the day? Are you gaming? Are you practicing an instrument? What are you doing when self-consciousness is really not present in guiding your actions?
Great.
Not using ChatGPT.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second. I know everyone's raring to go to talk about that. But I'll just add that I think there's a tendency to want to compare yourself. And that is what we do all day long. That is what, we are watching things, looking at things. We're always looking at ourselves in the context of other people and comparing. And I think that is the danger of like this whole process. We're often asking, well, what did somebody else write about? Or what did somebody else do? Or what activity do I need to participate in to be successful? And so I think being authentic probably means, again, really just thinking about what you enjoy, you are, who you are as a person. And that's a hard thing to ask a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old to really kind of, if I ask my children, who are you? There's like some things that are very easy to say, and then others are like, I don't know. And I don't know if I want to tell you my age, but I am still often thinking, what do I want to do when I grow up? So this is an evolving process. Okay, what is the purpose of the essay in an application? Go. Learn more about the applicant. Okay, that's good. To let them know you better as a person, to let them know your story. What are other purposes? What do you think the purpose of the essay is in an application? Oops, sorry. Okay. And I'll include supplements here too, because we will talk about that as well. What is the purpose of it? The main essay, Common App essay, supplements, even short answers. What are the purposes of these? To show the university who you are apart from your academics, to show if you are a good fit at the college, to give a better understanding of who you are. These are great. I do have a question. What is the purpose of the essay and application for you, admissions officer? And often we get this question of like, how much does it weigh? And so I want to kind of throw that out there as well. What's the purpose of the essay? How much does it weigh? Do you have, maybe tell us a little bit about what it looks like when you sit down in front of your computer getting ready to read those files. Like, how does it work?
What it looks like is, first of all, there's like a huge cup of coffee right on the left-hand side of my desk. Yep, there you go, Michelle. But I think generally speaking, the purpose of the essay is threefold, at least in terms of how I think about it. It's, first of all, it's to do what we were talking about previously, to demonstrate on authenticity. And originality is really hard. That's probably the most difficult thing in the essay. And, especially, coming from my perspective as someone, as an admissions officer, our office here at the University of Rochester, we're reading 20,000 applications, and you'll be surprised that there's not too much difference between a lot of the topics that come up in essays. And so originality can be really hard. Authenticity can be really hard. But in terms of like a technical aspect of what the essay is doing, we want to make sure that you can think critically. You're going to be writing a lot of essays in university, and we want to make sure that you have a baseline ability to do that. But also just in terms of the admissions process, and one way that you have control over the way in which we approach your application is, the essay is a chance for you to speak directly to the admissions officer, to the review panel, to communicate what you want specifically to highlight about your experience, to show why you are a particularly good fit for a university or a particular area of study, what have you. So that's kind of what I think about when I think about kind of the purpose of the essay.
Yeah, I echo what Brandon said. I think like for universities every year, we really receive thousands of applications, right? So for us, it's kind of like you're inviting thousands of students showing up on your door to a party, but you definitely want to know who those people are here to attend your party, right? Whether they're going to be having a good time, whether they're going to take advantage of everything that you're offered. So that's what we want to see from an essay, for you to really demonstrate who you are as a person, as a student, whether you're going to be a good fit for the community. And also, I would also say for some of the supplemental essays that we talked about, essentially, it's a great way for you to demonstrate your passion, your interest, your ability, and also your interest to the university as well. It is definitely an opportunity for students to really differentiate yourself from others, right? A lot of times, like at least like at Brandeis here, we receive a lot of students with, 4.0 GPA. Their extracurricular activities look similar to one another. And then sometimes, TOEFL scores, IELTS, Duolingo, they're all among the similar type of range. So ultimately, that essay or supplemental essay, those are the ways, those are the places where we can look and then see, okay, this is actually shows us the qualitative type of data that we're looking for, and then to really understand you as a person, as a student.
I would agree with everything my colleagues have said. I think the essays are a great differentiator when we're looking at thousands of applicants. And I think when you're seeing an essay and a school chooses a totally different prompt for only themselves, I think it's really important to ask yourself why a school might be asking you to write another essay. Because if we are asking you to write another essay, that means we're reading thousands upon thousands more essays. So we don't just do it to give you more work because it gives us more work. My dog really wants to join the conversation as well. But it's really important to think about, why, what are they trying to learn about me in this process?
Great. Okay. Well, so then, there are common app prompts, and then like Michelle said, and there's sometimes like one specific one that the school is asking you to do. Sometimes there's a choice. Even in the supplements, there might be a choice between one or two, or maybe even three. So how do you choose the prompt that's best for you? And I'll ask that to everybody, like, what do you think? How do you choose the prompt that's best for you? But then I'm going to ask the admissions officers for a little bit of advice, like which one do you go to? And is there one that's better than others? First, for the students and the counselors and the parents. Counselors, what do you recommend? What do you recommend to your student on how they should choose the prompt? Is there anybody who writes an essay first and then tries to shove it into a prompt? Like, what's the recommendation here? It looks like people need advice in admissions offices. How should a student choose the prompt that's best for them?
I'll go first. I think when I think about this question best, I'll actually start from two words. One is you, like we talked about, the essay has to be you, right? We want to learn more about you, not your dad, not your neighbor, not your dog, not your skateboard. We want to know who you are as a student, as an active member of your community, however you define community. And then the second word I will say best. So I can break them down actually. So when it comes to BEST, I love acronym if you don't know me, but ultimately BEST stands for brainstorm, evaluate, subtract, and transformative. So when I think about the best prompt, first, it has to start from you. So you need to start brainstorming about, who you are as a person, your experiences, your core values, your, stories, all of that. What you're proud of, what you're afraid of, right? Ask all of that question, do all of the work, deep work, like Michelle talked about way before starting your application. The second thing is evaluate. Once you have a list of, like topics that you can reflect on, and then assess how each prompt aligns with your core values, aligns with your stories. So that's like the evaluation piece. And then the third part would be subtract. So this is what we call in Chinese 做减法. This is really important because now you have like a list ready to go, but which one actually going to stick a little bit more in your mind? Do you have a concrete example to support what you want to, write about? What prompt do you feel most excited about that you cannot wait to dive in and then write about it and then share with the world? So I think that's going to be like the essence of 做减法, right? Really understand what matters the most to you based on each prompt. And then the last one is transformative. Because for us, like, we don't want you to just like tell a story. We want to really understand what you learned from those experiences. We want to know that you are, sort of like thoughtful. You have actively engaged with all of your experiences. You're actually reflecting on it. You learned something from your experiences. So that's like the part where we call transformative, at least like I call transformative. So hopefully that's kind of like the best approach that I can give you to choose like the best prompt.
I can try to add to that. I feel like that is just a perfect comprehensive answer. I think thinking about a few, as Pan mentioned, and then choosing the one that you find yourself thinking about and getting excited about as it evolves in your mind. But I'll just add something about sometimes you'll see create your own prompts, and that can be an option that you can choose. And I think it's really important when you're seeing a create your own, especially at a school individually, who gives you a few prompts and then a create your own, to make sure to create your own in the style of the essays that they are giving you, so that it doesn't look like you're just kind of repurposing an essay.
And just one last quick word, and actually, Gloria, you were joking at the beginning, but I don't think it's a bad thing to sometimes work backwards and think about a story that you want to share, and then see how that can best fit into one of the prompts on the Common Application or whatever essay prompts that you're working with. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, and it can work out really well sometimes.
That is the advice that some of these teachers are saying. Don't mind the prompt, just write something first. And then you can always find a prompt that actually works, because there are quite a few options. How many are in the Common App right now? Do you all know?
I think it's 8. I think 8, including the kind of, write a story of your choice, or so there's really kind of limitless options.
There's a lot of options. Are there, okay, so then the next question is are there, I think it's 7 prompts. Anyway, are there any topics that are off limits? Things that people should not write about?
So, I mean, I would maybe not write about overcoming a sports injury or the passing of a grandparent. Those tend to be pretty common essay topics that we get. And I know they can seem, those moments can seem really pivotal, especially, if you've been alive for only 16 or 17 years. Obviously, those moments are really, really pivotal. But they tend to be really, really common essays that I've read. I'm sure my panelists can back me up there, but I would say, generally speaking, really, there's, I wouldn't say there's a topic to shy away from or a subject to shy away from. Just be aware that ultimately people will be reading the essay, and it's kind of our job to have a lens of kind of judgment when we're reading those essays. So you want to make sure that what you are discussing would be appropriate relative to the situation of applying to a university. So
I tend to agree. I think really there's no strict rules about what topics are off limits when it comes to college essay. But in general, I would say probably it's a good idea to stay away from illegal activities such as, drug abuse or underage drinking, things like that. Sometimes those can be like a red flag for admissions committee. And then the second thing I would say, it's really about sort of like stay away from highly sensitive topics, such as commenting on a very controversial political figures or issues that is just like really highly sensitive or controversial. Because like I read an essay earlier this year about a student writing about Hitler. While it's like a really, I would say, sensitive topic, like the student approached it in a way that's, I don't know, just like did not come across very genuine, or it really did not, showcase who the student is as a student, as a person. It just like talked about a lot about, like the Hitler himself, and then just like did not, it was not very reflective. So I would just like say, stay away from highly controversial topics, because sometimes it does require a lot of sensitivity, and then requires a lot of like context when you are trying to explain, especially within 650, word limits.
I would agree with everything above. And I would just add, don't gross out your admissions officer, and also don't write a poem if you've never written a poem before. If you are a poet, if you are a writer, absolutely you can do that. But if you've never written a poem in your life, this is not the time to start doing it.
So we're going to continue this line of like, what do you not do in your essay? So we said what topics are off limits, and then we're already starting to talk about what should you not do. These are great. Are there any other things that you should not do in an essay? And I think I would love to touch on, because Michelle, you just talked about poems, and I think there is this like tendency of like what can grab your attention. So like there might be some writing methods that people have used over the years of like trying to grab your attention, and like would love to hear like what doesn't work in grabbing your attention, or like, and what doesn't work, or maybe, and we can say what works maybe as well. Like I know in previous essay talks, we've talked like, don't use lots of flowery language that you would never use, what are some other don'ts?
Well, I have a do. do be as specific as possible. The old adage is to show, not to tell in an essay. And I think adding specificity to your essay, really concentrating on the details, can bring a lot of creativity and originality to an essay. And that's one way that we know, for example, as an admissions counselor, that maybe AI generated essay would lack that specificity. So be as specific in the details that you can provide as possible when you are writing an essay.
So Michelle touched upon don't write a poem. I would say don't write a novel. Sometimes your essay can be really, really long. And you're not actually reflecting, like the true essence of the essay. And the other thing I would say is do not just like submit your essay without editing. It's going to be very important to proofread, make sure that your essay is tailored as possible. Because like admissions officers, we are paying attention when we're reading your applications. Last thing I would offer is to really share something that is consistent with the rest of your application. If you are going to share something that's inconsistent, make sure that you're providing a little bit context before you write about these.
And I'll just add, you don't have to write the next best work of fiction. You don't have to write something that the admissions officer is going to think about the rest of the day or use as an example when they get asked about a great essay question. The chances are you're probably going to write about something that an admissions officer has read something similar before. So I think when we're looking at your application individually, we're seeing the essays and we really just want you to write a solid essay that's demonstrating something new about yourself, something authentic about yourself, and is interesting to you, because if it's interesting to you, it'll be interesting to us when we're reading it, and that will complement your overall application.
Great. So we have already talked about some of these tips, but we're putting a few tips to consider up on the slide, because I know people often want something that they can grab. So you can grab these. We have done tons of Tuesday Talks in the past about essays, where we've done a values exercise, where we've done where we've actually had you sit and for 90 seconds to just kind of think about what are the first words that describe you. And lots of things are out there for you to kind of consider. But of these tips, admissions officers, are there any that you want to kind of like sit on for a second? I think the writing multiple drafts, Pan, you kind of mentioned editing being really important.
Yeah, two takeaways from this slide for me just to add is definitely the last point there. Have others review your essay, have as many eyes as possible, read those essays. Ultimately, you're not going to be reading your essay on an admissions panel. Many other people are. So you want to have some other opinions to share, to catch little errors. And, especially when it comes to supplemental essays, you want to make sure that the correct university is listed in that essay. Actually more common error than you would think. So, if you're writing one of our supplemental essays, be sure not to list Brandeis or Chicago, list Rochester, and vice versa. So huge tip to take away.
I'll add to that. I think reading it out loud is helpful. Reading it and thinking, does this sound like me? And maybe reading it to a friend or a family member and asking that question, because we really do want to see your voice come through. The essay doesn't and really shouldn't sound like a PhD student wrote it or a teacher or parent wrote it. It really should sound like you, and it should sound like a high school student.
Yeah, sorry, Pan, I just want to say that's a phenomenal tip. Coming from an academic experience and thinking about when I was writing papers, reading something out loud, you slow down, it's easier to catch mistakes. Really, really great point.
Absolutely. I would echo all of the things my colleagues said. Just like one more thing when it comes to, essays, like I think like Gloria, you mentioned a little bit earlier, when it comes to, flowery languages, sometimes like we see those big words quite often in an essay. If you just like put a couple here and there and then you use it correctly, that's great. It pull our attention. But if you just like, build your entire essay with those big words, sometimes it has, create a sort of like distancing effect, right? Like it just like pushes us away. So stay authentic is really important, coming back to what we shared earlier.
And I think, earlier when we talked about what is the purpose of the essay, nobody said like, that we're looking for creative writing, we're looking for a research paper. Like, nobody said anything about like writing itself. And I think that's the part I think I wanted to talk about, because we're concerned about now AI creating essays for us, and we are going to move into ChatGPT here. But I think none of you said like we're looking for really, really well written work. I mean, are you looking for well-written work? Like what, does that, when you look at an essay and a supplement, are you thinking like, oh, this person can write, so they're going to be successful in college? Does that come into the calculation?
I don't know if we necessarily think of it as a plus. We assume that the essay will be well written. I think it's something that we don't maybe notice when it is well written, but we'll notice it if it's not well written. So I think it should be polished. It should be a solid essay, but it does not need to be something again that looks like an academic wrote it.
I will add, just because we are speaking, largely with an international audience today, on a certain baseline level, yeah, when I read an essay as part of application review, I'm assuming obviously that English will be your second language, but also it is a way to show English language proficiency, and that's certainly something that's going to be a part of the review of your application. So I think to a certain extent, absolutely, we are looking to make sure that an essay reads well.
I don't have anything to add here. I think my colleagues covered pretty much everything here. Awesome. We're now looking for the next novelist. We're now looking for the next poet. in college application, and you can never write, into Brandeis or write into U Chicago, things like that. So just like focus on who you are and then show us your story.
And it is an essay. It has some parameters on word count and things like that. It's not a bullet list and not a checklist. So yeah, I'm aware, and I appreciate, Michelle, you saying like we don't notice when it's well written, but we do notice when it's not well written. So you do have to write, but it isn't you're not getting graded like you might in your English class. Okay, so we're going to talk about ChatGPT. People are already asking questions about it, which I love. So I'm going to start with a few polls because I just want to see, some of you might have been like, why do people keep saying ChatGPT? I don't even know what that is. So I would love to know, have you personally explored OpenAI, ChatGPT? And people are taking the poll. A little bit faster participation here. Got all right, so far the majority are saying yes. There's 30% of you have said no. Nobody says I don't know what it is, so I'm sure people came here knowing a little bit about ChatGPT, and only a few of you say that you've explored other AI platforms. I'm going to give it like 2 more seconds here. We're at 63%, 64% of you have participated. Anybody else want to participate on the other platforms? I don't know if you can see the polls, but you can just say that you can just type in the chat like yes or no. I have explored ChatGPT. Okay, so it looks like 68% of you have explored ChatGPT before, and 30% of you have not. So that's cool. All right, so the next question is, let's see, am I not launching for some reason? All right, here we go. Okay, what is your current feeling about AI? I would love to know how you guys are feeling about this. And so for those of you who might not be able to see the poll because you're on a different platform, basically, the question is, this describes my current feelings about AI and my work. The first answer is I'm skeptical about the whole thing. The next answer is I already use it regularly. The third answer is using an AI platform is akin to plagiarism or cheating. And the fourth is AI is a resource we can and must use to stay current. And the last is I'm not sure. So right now, people are still thinking about what we have. The least participation on this poll so far, 47%. Let's see what people are saying. And you know what? We don't know who you are, so don't feel judged by your answer. Like nobody knows who is saying which, and it is totally okay to have any of these answers. And so far, we've got 56% participation. And of those 56%, 59% are saying that AI is a resource we can and must use to stay current. The second most popular answer is I'm not sure, which is probably why you're here. And yeah, there's 15% of you are using it regularly. And so that plus AI as a resource we can and must use to stay current feels like the direction is that ChatGPT is here and here to stay, and is going to be used regardless of what you actually feel about it. So for those who don't know what it is or what it looks like, I did record a little blip here, just so that you can see what it's like. And I put in one of the Common App prompts, and so let's just look for a second to see what it does. Okay, so if you've never interacted with it, it goes pretty quickly. depending on what time of day you're using it, how many people are on it. It can be as quick as 30 seconds. Sometimes a good, a longer essay might take 2 minutes. This is probably going to take about 2 minutes here. And you can see that it's writing pretty well. So if we're purely just to judge a piece of writing by a piece of writing, I think ChatGPT is getting there. I mean, when I first started it, I didn't start it. When I first started exploring it back in December, I already felt like, oh, this is not bad. Maybe B+ work. And more recently, when I've used it, I'm like, oh, we're getting into A- territory, or maybe even an A, depending on what it's writing. So, I just wanted to put this up as an example of a video of just what it would look like if you were to just put in the prompt. I'm going to pause that for a second and ask, how did that make you feel? So if you can type in the chat, admissions officers, you're welcome to weigh in. How does this make you feel? How did that make you feel watching it happen in front of you? For those of you who've already interacted with it, which was, quite a few of you, I mean, at least 20% of you probably have done this. What is your feeling? What comes out of any reactions? Amazement. Some people are like, what? No other response, just shock. And okay, so okay, great. Somebody's like, it sounds like a generic IB reflection. Great. Okay, so I am continuing this video. Let's see if I can get it to the place. After doing it, I actually said, can you adjust this since this is a college application Common App essay? Because it didn't feel like it was anything about a student. So I did it again, and then it was another minute or so. And this time it has my senior year of high school. It added some things about high school years to make sure that it was talking about maybe something a little bit more specific to college applications. So now some of the reaction is like, if you use it regularly, you can tell it's machine written right away. I'm just gonna ask admissions officers. I know that May and June are kind of like conversations happen in offices about like what's going to happen this next cycle in terms of policies and whatnot. And earlier somebody asked the question, are you all using anything to detect AI? Or are you doing anything that's going to be different than how you normally review essays now that this exists? And I know there are no final answers, and I know it's like, maybe it's going to be, it depends, but do the three of you have any kind of insight right now about?
I'll start. This is definitely something that comes up quite often in our office right now, just talking about the impact of ChatGPT and other type of AI bot generated, essays, right? What kind of role does essay actually play in our holistic application review approach? Right now, we do not have any detection software that we're using to detect whether this is bot generated or not. However, I think the really beauty of holistic application review is that essay is just like one tiny component. So when we are looking at your essay, we are looking at whether it's consistent, right? We can quickly notice if it's inconsistent with the rest of your application, because there's so many other pieces of information in your application that can tell us whether that's your TOEFL writing score, maybe that's your writing sample coming from initial view, right? There are many other places that we're able to see whether, like your essay is consistent with the rest of your writing, the quality of your writing. So we're looking at that. And also, obviously, interview is another way for us to, really understand your response right on the spot, how you're interacting with people, how you're reacting to questions. And then in terms of your writing on the spot, what does it look like? So we do have quite a lot of information in our system that can help us to determine whether it's genuine, whether it's truthful.
I would agree completely. And for U Chicago, we don't have a plan to use the detection software at this point. And really, I'm not too concerned about ChatGPT in our process. It's not something that we are, worried about. I think it can be a helpful tool. And personally, I think it will evolve into something that is pretty widely used. But at this stage, it's not something that's giving you ideas. And you can see that in the essay that was written from Gloria, well, not from Gloria, from ChatGPT. But right now it's giving you the structure and it's giving you kind of the fluff of the essay, but we're not really seeing your authentic ideas or thoughts. And it's really not that interesting of an essay at this point with ChatGPT. Who knows how it will evolve? But U Chicago also tested it with our What If the Moon Were Made of Cheese essay. And that was one example of it produced an essay, but it wasn't one that was authentic or interesting in any way. It just did the work, essentially.
Lots of thoughts about this. The first thing, though, that you'll notice in looking at that essay, there's nothing specific. There's nothing related back to an individual experience. It's just almost like, there's no nouns. It's just adjectives and verbs. It's just there's nothing specific to an essay or to a personal experience. I mean, I think you can tell, as Pan said, using the context of an application to determine something, determine whether something is authentic or not. I mean, it's just like using a thesaurus to fluff up the language in an essay. That's really easy to tell when we're looking at an essay because we're taking into context the style of your writing as an applicant. So that really comes across quite clearly when we're examining an application. I also, I don't think there's, again, I think what was, Gloria, I really, you sent us the article in the Chronicle of Higher Education where it went through how a university student actually how it's very common for university students to use ChatGPT to structure an essay, even with something that seems like, using pretty archaic knowledge that maybe only a university student would use. So I think it's going to be fairly common for students to use it. I think, maybe the essay is not the best way to demonstrate critical thinking as ChatGPT and AI generated essays kind of become more common. Maybe the essay is not going to be something that becomes a really critical part of our application review, or maybe essays aren't used in university lectures as much anymore to evaluate your ability to critically think. Because I think ultimately that's kind of what it's cutting out. And so those are just some of my thoughts. And just, at a practical level, University of Rochester, we're not going to be putting these through any type of software to try to detect AI.
Yeah, and I think, obviously we haven't spent tons of time playing with this today. And if you keep asking ChatGPT questions, like I think a lot of people are like, are you, do the university has a policy, and like, are there ways to catch it? That the reality is that you can use ChatGPT similarly the way that you use any resource and still make it your own and not have none of the AI detection will actually catch it. Because at the end of the day, when you finally iterate so much, and what we said earlier, the same advice applies, edit, if you're editing and you're reading it and you're having other people read it, and then all of a sudden the story is still actually yours. And I think that's the point of our talk today, is that I see some comments up here on other platforms saying, like, I'm worried, we're worried, is this going to disadvantage people? Is it, we're worried about machines writing everything. I think the question needs to go back to, what do you want admissions officers to know about you? Or for, if, this little example here, is somebody's example. Somebody's example. It's not your example, but they're talking about some experience that they've had. And you can feed what experience you want to have, but you still have to have those deep thoughts of what that experience you had was. And then again, why I kind of kept asking you all about, are you grading well-written work? I think all along, maybe well-written work wasn't the thing that you were looking for anyway. You were looking for a story. And ChatGPT doesn't necessarily take away the story if you use it improperly and just copy and paste this thing. Yes. Yes, the machines will figure out, there will be AI detection that can tell. But I think I can send that Chronicle link to everybody, so you all can also consider that, and the way that students use it and the way that you use it, the way that counselors use it, is not just copy and paste. And so it's a little.
Gloria, if I could just interrupt real quickly, just relative to some of the worries that maybe counselors are having, as students maybe that don't use it, and is that a disadvantage? I mean, not everyone's going to have access to the ability to log on and create an account, or even just have access to a computer. I think, students already are availing themselves of lots of different resources that are extra personal, extra to the application process as an individual process, whether that's having a counselor guide them, an independent counselor, parents, all kinds of different help that's already out there. And I think, again, the ability to add back in specifics to your own personal experience is going to be really important as a way that we can use as an admissions committee to kind of distinguish more authentic pieces of writing. And I'll just, quick anecdote, the Rochester, we have supplemental essay questions. I plugged in one of our supplemental questions into ChatGPT, and it was a really, really generic response that really didn't reflect back at all anything as it relates to what the question is asking for a detailed response to. Again, it was just like a collection of verbs and adjectives, talking about, hey, one of the questions at Rochester is, how are you going to utilize our experience here at Rochester? And, it was very generic responses. I'm going to use the clubs at Rochester to, be XYZ. It didn't list any specific clubs, right? I mean, so the way in which you can use specificity, I think, is going to be important in authenticity.
Yeah, so I put the tips that we put up back up because they still apply. No matter how you feel about ChatGPT right now, like, there is this thoughtfulness that needs to happen. You should be the focus, not your grandparents, not your uncle, not your dog, not your classmates, and you specifically should be the focus of your essay. So not this fluffy, like, I overcame a challenge, but really like, how, why, what is your how, what is your why? What I have found that, in working with ChatGPT, it does get a little bit, it's not that concise, actually. It does get like flowery, and maybe a lot of people in this world have tried to write flowery essays over the years, and that is the data that that is training the AI, but it is not as concise as it could be. And writing multiple drafts. I mean, ChatGPT could write multiple drafts. Like I only did one iteration on this example, but you could do multiple iterations. But again, and then proofread and edit. ChatGPT has errors. They might give you details that are wrong. You have to actually read it, you have to edit it, and you have to have other people review the essay. So I know some of you are like, oh, it's horrible. And then some of you are like, this is so cool. And there's like such a range of emotion about ChatGPT right now, both for you all and for admissions offices. But I think we wanted to start that dialogue here. We're going to continue that dialogue throughout. And so if you have questions, comments, you want to keep talking about it, please send me a message. And I'm just gonna like go back. Like I wanted to end on, what does authenticity mean to you? Because at the end of this, what we're talking about is you as a person, not the technique of how to get it and the tools that you can use to get there. So any other thoughts on authenticity, closing words from the admissions offices? The hour has gone by so quickly as it normally does, and so I want to respect y'all's time.
I think you said it perfectly. It's really about your ideas, your interests, and how you're conveying them. And it's not the tool or technique. We're always going to have new advancements in technology. And I think it's really important to just think about yourself as an individual. And maybe you'll use those resources if they're available. Maybe you won't, but it really is about your personal identity and how you convey that.
Yeah, really not about the ability to write, but the ability to think and reflect.
100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, it's all about showing your story.
Amazing. Well, as usual, if you want to learn more about the colleges that were represented today, please reach out to them. They have lots of great virtual events on their own spaces as well, and so they can answer specific questions about their colleges. And so if you're interested in that, reach out to them and find out more, or just go on their websites. And then I'm going to hang out for another 20 minutes or so to talk about story and answer questions about initial view if you'd like to stay. And we just touched on the importance of story. Next week's Tuesday Talk is all about the story. What is your story? How to find your story? And we're going to do a little bit of values exercising there. So if you're interested in doing that, come back next week on Tuesday. In the meantime, Brendan, Pan, Michelle, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule. Enjoy your Tuesday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to hang out here for a little longer. And so if you have questions, go ahead and use the Q&A box for the chat. Farina, I know you asked earlier about, what about ChatGPT on reference letters? I did another seminar a few weeks ago, and I actually did use ChatGPT, write a recommendation letter for such and such student applying to such and such college, and it was great. It's 30 seconds, 2 minutes. It was 2 minutes and had a really great structure of a letter. And the admission officer I had on my panel that time, she said, the honest truth is we will get reference letters, recommendation letters all the time that actually look like a template, that they've used some sort of template and then they're just changing the names, and sometimes they can tell because it'll be somebody's name on the top and then somebody else's name on the bottom. So there have been problems with how individuals have submitted their work to begin with. So ChatGPT doesn't really change that. What it does do is just force you to kind of think through just being careful, being thoughtful, being intentional, and using tools that can help you save time. Like, sure, I mean, I think I already know a group of counselors who've told me that they're going to be using ChatGPT for their reference letters or recommendation letters. But I think somebody asked a good question earlier of just kind of the concern is that not everybody knows how to use it responsibly. And that is a concern. And that is why it's so important for you, especially if you're a counselor here, of just having that really honest conversation with your students about why we use the tools that we use, what can they be helpful for, what can they not be helpful for. Having an honest conversation about why you do the things you do, like being authentic. That's what I hope comes out of it. I think it'll be very, very difficult for admissions officers to be able to tell whether or not an essay used ChatGPT or not. I know that some offices I've talked to have talked about kind of wanting students to indicate whether or not they use it. I'm not sure how it's going to shake out. It's too early to tell. But I think really the conversation actually needs to be more at, what is the work that we want our students to do? We want the work to be one of reflection. We want them to ask good questions. We want them to be able to think about what's going to happen when you get to campus. You're not going to, you're going to be interacting with people on the fly. You're going to have an answer for something without having, tons of time to look up an answer. So, so these are the conversations that we're having. Okay, let's see. Anybody have any questions about initial view? I'm hanging out for another 15 minutes. It can be a question about the initial view, it can be a question about how to get your student to talk about their story. Happy to answer anything that you might have. For those of you who don't know, initial view, I think some people know, you might know initial view as the platform for Tuesday Talks, but actually our main platform is a video platform. So it's a interview video platform. Students come and do a live interview with a real person. We're not doing AI interviews yet, but it's a real person, and then you talk to that person for about 15 minutes. It's recorded. The whole conversation is recorded, and then there is a writing sample component. So you'll get a prompt and you have 20 minutes to respond. And then you can send that package to as many schools as you'd like. You can send, at one time to your ED school or to a few of your EA schools, and you come back and use that same interview and send it for regular decision. It's a great way, I think, to supplement and show the admissions officer the real you. I think some of you are concerned even, if all of the application is being written by either ChatGPT or an independent consultant or or lots of parents helping, how does the admission officer actually really know who the person is? And so the initial view interview really is a way for you to showcase who you are and really get that personality and that storytelling and that authenticity out in the open very quickly in the process. How do we prepare? Okay, so how do we prepare? The work has to happen way earlier, just like Michelle said. It is something, as simple as if you're a parent, we still try to do this even with all the activities that are involved. We have, family dinners, and at the family dinner table, really intentional conversation, and that, sometimes they hate it. They don't want to do it at all. But when they were little, it started off as like, we're going to talk about the best part of the day, the worst part of the day, something that was, that you had to challenge yourself to do today. And that exercise of asking a question and having someone respond is something that you can do. So if you have a 9th grader, I would start that if you haven't already started that. 8th grader, I would start that if you haven't already done that. If you have a junior and you're like, well, we didn't do that, but they are going to a great school and they're having lots of conversations, great. If you're a counselor, you should be having these times where you pair people up and just have a conversation, just ask all the questions, like, what did you wake up thinking about? What do you go to bed thinking about? What's the thing that sparks the most joy? Like, you're basically asking lots and lots of questions so that a student is just constantly thinking and reflecting and thinking, well, why did I do that today? Did I go through autopilot and just go through the motions, or did I do it because I'm motivated somehow? I'm motivated either extrinsically or intrinsically, just being honest with yourself. That is a big part of the preparation. Now, obviously, when you've talked to your friends enough, it feels awkward. When you talk to your family members enough, it feels awkward. when you talk to, even, when you're talking to your student, they feel a little too relaxed with you to have a proper conversation. We do offer something called a junior interview, and the junior interview is the same thing that the regular interview is, but and so it gives the student a chance to practice with a stranger. Sometimes practicing with a stranger is great because it's fresh. It also gives the student an opportunity to be, on the technology, on the platform, making sure that their webcam's working and the lighting is good and the sound is working okay. And then the benefit of the junior interview is that you don't send it anywhere, but we actually have an admissions officer or a former admissions officer record a short video, usually like 2, 3, 4 minutes, back to the student, giving a little bit of feedback. So they might say something like, "Oh, you look like you're not engaged," or "Are you reading something on the side? Make sure that you are looking at me and having a conversation with me. I would have loved to hear a little bit more details about such and such." And it was good today on our talk. We heard from your admissions officers, like, they don't need to hear about your grandmother. They don't need to hear about your mom, your dog. Like, these are all parts of the story, but the main character of the story is you. So in the interview, the main character is you too. And so, I sometimes, even when I tell a story, I'm kind of giving a lot of details that don't matter. And so an admissions officer is going to be able to give that feedback and say, "It was great hearing about this, but I didn't get the reason why you really like it, or I would have appreciated some more details about this," things like that. A great reflection tool. And then the nice thing too is that this is recorded. So if you're a counselor and your student does a junior interview, you can watch it and kind of work with them and say, like, you talked about really generic reasons for liking math. Everybody likes math for those reasons, but let's think about why math is important to you specifically. Let's think about an experience that showcases why you're definitely a math guy or a math girl. So yeah. So the junior interview can be signed up for at any time. It is on our website as one of the options when you go in to reserve an interview. If you are at a school that has been talking about that, it's quite possible that they have already done kind of a bulk purchase, so you can think about that as well. Any other questions? Common mistakes. Sorry, there are not a lot of common mistakes, other than, I'll just say, like, people trying to read something. So, there was a question like, well, can people start using ChatGPT to prepare for the interview? And my answer is yes, they can start using ChatGPT to prepare for an interview. But the issue is that you cannot be reading something off of, like, a lot of people like to hide it kind of right here behind the screen, or even on the screen. We try to make it so that our platform blocks that from happening, but it's I can't stop it from happening. You could put your phone right here and have something reading. But the problem with the reading is that people can tell, like, people can tell when you're reading or memorizing something. We've had students, that is the biggest mistake. So don't do that. You can use it to prepare, and you can, like, have pieces of paper to prepare. Like, okay, if the interviewer asks me about academics, my favorite subject is this, and this is why, and this is this experience of why something I'm proud of. These are the things that you can really prepare for and write about, so that you really know what you want to say. But once you've kind of done that preparation, just throw the piece of paper away, or close down all the windows, don't have anything back there, because at the end of the day, what you want is have a real conversation with the person. And our interviewers are real people, and they definitely want to have that conversation. They're going to ask you follow-up questions. They're going to ask you to clarify. They might interrupt you if you go into a monologue. And so that would be kind of a pitfall to avoid. Don't read anything, don't memorize anything. Otherwise, just really be yourself. I I can't stress that enough. And don't feel like you need to be, we have some example interviews on our website, and I think sometimes people watch them and, oh no, I'm not like that person, or oh gosh, they're so good at answering that question and I would never be able to do that. Don't think that way, because every one of the students who come through and does an interview is very different from another. And some of the most powerful interviews are not necessarily ones where they were really, really loquacious, or they were really animated. Sometimes it's just like maybe even one sentence and very thoughtful that could be powerful. So you have to remember that this conversation and like the words that admissions officers are hearing is just one tiny bit of the whole process, but it does bring together that whole package together. And it does reassure the admissions officer who might be worried, like, oh, I don't know how this essay came to be. Like, I don't know how much time they used with ChatGPT. I don't know how many people helped them edit it. But if they hear you talk and it's consistent with what they're reading and what they're seeing in the rest of the application, then that gives you a leg up. So, all right. Well, are there any other questions? I don't want to keep hanging out if people want to go, but I'm happy to also stay. There's still quite a few of you here. Don't be afraid to ask any more questions. I'm going to go ahead and put my email address here if you have any other additional questions that you'd like to ask. I'm happy to answer questions, happy to schedule a call with people if they need to have a call. If you're a counselor and you're like, I'm learning about the tools, I'd like to learn more, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to have a call with you. Fantastic. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye and let you all get on with your evenings or your afternoons or your mornings, depending on where you are. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for coming to Tuesday Talks. We'll see you next week. Bye.